Good. I declare open this hearing of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights into Antisemitism at Australian Universities. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here today. I'm Josh Burns, the Chair of the Committee, and I have with me Mr Henry Pike, the Deputy Chair, Ms Jodie Bellier and Ms Kylie Tink, and we've also got Senator O'Sullivan, who's walking past me right now. On behalf of the committee, I welcome you all here today. These are public proceedings being streamed live via the Parliament's website, and a Hansard transcript is being made. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Parliament as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence. Witnesses have also have a right to request to be heard in camera. I now welcome representatives from Macquarie University. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to parliamentary committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee today?
I'm Bruce Stoughton and I'm the Vice-Chancellor of Macquarie University.
Welcome.
And good morning, I'm Ross McLennan. I'm the Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Research Services.
Welcome. I'll now invite you to make a short opening statement and then we'll open up for a discussion.
Chair, Senators and members of the House, thank you for the opportunity to be with you before the committee today. Since the abhorrent attack on October the 7th, 2023, Macquarie University stands in absolute solidarity with other Australian universities and Australian civil society against the rise of anti-Semitism, whether on campuses or anywhere in our nation. Such actions have no place in Australia. Macquarie University does not tolerate racism, discrimination, hate speech or vilification of any kind, whether it be anti-Semitism, Islamophobia or any other form of such acts. Since October 2023, I have been actively engaging with our university community to reinforce that there is no place for anti-Semitism or discrimination of any type. We are also appalled by the recent escalation of overt anti-Semitism in Australian cities. As we begin the new academic year at the university, we are committed to redoubling our efforts to provide a safe, welcoming and inclusive environment for every single member of our community. Our policies also reflect the fundamental value of freedom of expression and academic freedom, while aiming to ensure that discourse is conducted lawfully, respectfully and courteously. As an example of our commitment, I request that my recent communication to staff on January 30 be entered into the record of these proceedings, illustrating our clear stance on anti-Semitism. The university has policies and procedures addressing behaviour and conduct, providing guidance on discrimination, including anti-Semitism. Our employment agreements, which have been tested in the courts, are key in determining any sanctions against staff. These policies and agreements undergo regular review, typically every 3 to 4 years, with oversight from our governing University Council. Balancing a safe, respectful community with the rights of academic freedom is a complex challenge, and Macquarie University is actively involved in navigating that space at the moment. We have received a limited number of complaints about anti-Semitism within our community. We have had no attempts at encampment. We have had a small number of small, peaceful, pro-Palestinian protests in 2023 and 2024. We've had one student complaint about a classroom statement which was addressed. An anti-Semitic graffiti campaign in February 2024 on the campus was swiftly dealt with in collaboration with the New South Wales Police, leading to successful prosecution. An Israeli flag was removed from a student's stall during orientation week and discarded by a Jewish student opposing the Israeli government's actions. This matter was managed by the Dean of Students. One academic staff member's activity has attracted significant attention and complaint to the university. In response to rising anti-Semitic incidents, Macquarie University has taken a number of proactive steps, including reviewing and amending our policies as needed, enhancing communication with our students and staff, along with the support available to them, maintaining close collaboration with the New South Wales Police as we need it, ensuring adherence to our policies around academic gatherings and conferences, and enhancing our security services where that is indicated. In closing, Senators and members, I reaffirm in the strongest possible terms Macquarie University's opposition to anti-Semitism. We remain committed to supporting our entire community, every single member, while upholding our role as a trusted institution of knowledge and inquiry. We strive to be a place of genuine care for all. Chair, Senators, members, I thank you for the opportunity to present and look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for those opening statements. Let's go through some of them. You talk about a safe and welcoming environment. If a staff member wasn't providing a safe and welcoming environment, what actions would you take?
So we've taken a number of actions. We have historically been a community of great welcome for students and staff from many different parts of the world, many belief systems, many cultural and religious backgrounds. And we do have a number of initiatives for our student body, which has been escalated over the last few years. We have taken the step of appointing a Dean of Students as a full-time specific role held by a senior, seasoned academic staff member whom we appointed into that role to be all about the care of our student body. Not the academic side, although she is involved in that at times, but more in the community side of our student body. We have, and she has been very actively involved in reaching out to and engaging with individual students.
I'm sorry to cut you off because we've only got limited time, and I'm going to hand over to my colleagues in a second. If a staff member actively called for spaces on university to be unsafe, what action would you take, or have you taken?
If a staff member, are you asking if a staff member called for that?
Yes.
Yes. So the actions we have taken about that are repeated statements from me in a variety of different fora, written, oral formats, staff meetings, senior staff leadership forum, about our position on being a safe and welcoming part of our community. We do remind our staff about our policy and procedure frameworks which preclude any behaviour which would make someone feel unsafe.
So you've made statements. Has any action been taken against any staff if they have called for spaces to be unsafe?
There's no specific action has been taken against any staff member.
So let me then turn to one of your staff members. You have a doctor in your university, Dr. Randa Abdul Fattah, who has said publicly, if you are a Zionist, you have no claim or right to cultural safety. It is the duty of those who oppose racism to ensure that every space Zionists enter is culturally unsafe for them. Do you agree with those statements?
I do not agree with those statements at a personal level.
And have you done anything to ensure that that university professor doesn't have influence over the spaces at your university? Has there been any action taken?
First thing I would point out there is the particular staff member you do reference, and I would crave that during this hearing we have respect for the rights of privacy and confidentiality with regard to the law about any individual member of any community.
Yep.
And any matter which may ultimately end up before the courts. But let me answer the question you've asked. In the event that a staff member makes a statement that raises concern, what we would do and have done is address that concern with the staff member at the local level in the first instance in their reporting line, where conversations would happen urging them to restrain themselves and to comply with the university's policy framework. At the same time as that, we do have regard, as I said in my opening remarks, about the rights and I believe privileges of academic staff around freedom of speech and academic freedom.
So there's been no disciplinary action. I mean, there's clearly been conversations with management, but has there been any disciplinary action on that staff member? Have they been removed as a staff member from the university?
No staff member has been removed from the university. If one wishes to address specifics, then I'm not confident that this is a public forum, that it's the right place to address specifics.
I mean, these comments have been made on the public record. I'm not making this up, Professor, and I'm not in any way making any suggestions that that you personally agree with these statements. You just said you don't. You just said the university wants to create a safe space for students. You said that you abhor racism, that you are absolutely in conjunction with the efforts to ensure that students are safe on university. And yet you've got a staff member who are making comments calling, I can go through more, the Israeli Zionist demons, may 2025 be the end of Israel, the people of the Holocaust committing a Holocaust. I mean, they're all on the public record. Does the university endorse those comments?
No, we absolutely do not endorse those comments, but I would also point out that the definition of anti-Zionism is ultimately a matter for the law on which the law is silent.
So, but you also have a duty of care to ensure that your students are safe. Have your students expressed that they are not safe on campus?
I'd add on one comment about particular staff member you raised, which is public knowledge. She is a research fellow under a research grant ordered by the ARC, the Australian Research Council, a national body. She is not involved in the classroom on a regular basis as a teacher. She does not have regular contact with the student body.
Is she paid? Is her salary paid by the university?
Her salary is paid by the university under a contract from the Australian Research Council.
Well, okay, but she's a staff member. She's contracted to the university. She would have agreed to uphold the university's code of conduct as well as part of that, wouldn't she?
Yes.
So is she upholding the university's code of conduct?
Any potential transgression of the code of conduct or the various other policies we have which address matters such as discrimination will ultimately be addressed through the university's enterprise agreement with staff, which provides her with certain rights in a long process, which would be gone through if cause arose.
Well, you made a statement, or the university made a statement, saying it's aware of comments made on social media by a member of its staff that has caused concern and distress among some members of the community. Was anything done about it?
As I indicated before, matters such as that are addressed with the staff member through their supervisory line.
Yeah. So a supervisor had a conversation. Has anything changed?
The university maintains its position in solidarity around our statements I've already made around racism, vilification and discrimination. We are beholden to, as you pointed out, our policy framework and ultimately the contractual obligations with that staff member as emboldened in the enterprise agreement. This is the dilemma and the conundrum that my university and every university in Australia finds itself in the intersection between a range of things which are essentially about social norms and social values, stopping short of the law and what the law demands, and our employment contractual arrangements.
I understand that, Vice-Chancellor, but if your code of conduct and if your opening statement as the Vice-Chancellor has said that all members of staff and students must uphold a safe and respectful place, I mean, you've got clearly a staff member who you yourself have admitted that is causing distress, and as far as I can understand from this hearing, the only thing that's happened was a conversation with their supervisor. No further action was taken. It doesn't sound like there was any management plan. It doesn't sound like there was any formal warning. Was there a formal warning given to the staff member?
The particularities of any individual member, as I've advocated before, do deserve considerations under the law created in this Parliament around privacy and confidentiality. I do not believe it's appropriate for me to go further about what the university has done out of regard for those laws.
Chair, with respect, I think an employer does have that obligation to maintain privacy when they are dealing with an employee.
So then let's talk principles, because I think part of this inquiry is to ensure that we can give confidence to students and staff who are coming back to university that the university is not going to tolerate the conversations or calls from their own staff saying that there should be spaces that are not safe for some students. So what confidence can you give students that this won't happen again?
I can give my student body the same confidence I provide to them on any matter in relation to their welcome and well-being at the university. I am an actively engaged member and leader of my community. I am out and about. I am well recognised in the community. Any student who asks to see me personally is not denied an opportunity to do that. I meet with students, student groups. I have an executive staff who are very helpful in supporting our student body, and we do this in a variety of formats. At the new year, when the new classes begin, we will have a formal convocation ceremony, an unusual event for an Australian university, where we formally welcome the new students to the university. We've done this for a number of years. I introduced that to my university. During last year's convocation ceremony, I specifically and very demonstrably addressed those new students and the attending academic staff in the graduation hall, specifically about matters of discrimination and racism and our zero tolerance for them. We write with our student to our student body about this. We also convene, as I've indicated earlier, regularly with student groups on the university campus to both ensure they understand the rule basis, but also particularly to provide support for them and to make sure they have access to all the very significant support services the university offers to our students.
Okay. Macquarie has zero form of tolerance for any form of inappropriate workplace behaviour of any kind. You cite discrimination, bullying, victimisation. You say that you comply with work health and safety legislation. You speak up about any actual potential safety hazards, physical or psychosocial. You cite diversity and inclusion. I just can't see how the statements of one of your staff members adheres to this, and I can't see how the university hasn't already taken action on this. But let's put that aside. Have you made any public statements disagreeing with this professor?
I have maintained my position as a leader of the university, and we are a university who adopts a position of viewpoint neutrality. We've done that, for argument's sake, with the marriage equality debate. We did that with the voice for Indigenous
That's fine,
Australians.
Professor, but we're not talking about political neutrality here. I absolutely, I studied Middle East history at university as well. I absolutely believe there should be a respectful and thoughtful discussion around Middle East history, around ideologies, around nationalism, around self-determination. These are all topics that are absolutely within the purview of universities to discuss. That's not what's going on here. We're not talking about the merits of one particular academic ideology or another. We're talking about a university professor who works for you saying that there should be no safe spaces for a particular group of people. We're talking about a university professor who is using her platform to call for the end of the destruction of a particular state. We're talking about a university professor decrying and utilising the Holocaust to use it against particular, directed at some of your staff and students, because your professor isn't talking about those people in the Middle East. These comments are referring to people in Australia. And I'm just asking you, don't you think as the leader of the university, it would be important for you to make statements that make it clear that you and the university do not agree with that approach?
I have made statements about the university's position on racism, vilification, anti-Semitism. I do point out that the particular academic staff member's statement was about cultural safety, which is not defined under Australian law, and that has been a conundrum.
So it's okay to be culturally unsafe, but not actually safe?
Again, I would point out that any consideration of an academic staff member's relationship to the university in terms of employment under our employment agreement would ultimately be tested at law. As I indicated earlier, I don't believe it's
also
appropriate.
tested by your code of conduct, where it says means creating an environment where our people feel a sense of belonging regardless of their gender, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, cultural background, intersex status, race, ethnicity, nationality. I mean, that's your code of conduct.
The way our internal legislation inside the university, our policies and procedures, are ultimately tested is under the terms of the enterprise agreement. They are intricately interlinked, they are referred to, and ultimately any sanction occurs under the enterprise agreement of a transgression of any policy. That is a matter of the way the law of contractual relationship works.
Sure, but it sounds like you haven't made any public statements because you'll find that people can be culturally unsafe.
Now, I have repeatedly been on record about our stand around having a safe, welcoming community. I've been on record about that internally in the university and in multiple releases to the media, for argument's sake.
But nothing particular about one of your staff members and the comments that they have made calling for your university to be culturally unsafe?
About any staff member, we steadfastly take the position that we do not comment on matters related to individual staff members out of respect for their rights under the legislation in relation to privacy and confidentiality.
It sounds like you're protecting the staff member and not your students.
Excuse me,
Well, it sounds like that you're unwilling to make any public statement saying that you disagree with it, that you believe that there is a problem here that is worth investigating, that you're willing to start a process, that you're willing to engage on this in any particular way, Vice-Chancellor, other than your general statements about racism, which I think, obviously I support. But this is not a general statement. This is a specific incident with a staff member of your university where they are calling for spaces to be culturally unsafe, in your words, and that there has been, you're not even committing to me today that you're willing to undergo an investigation internally to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Let me make it very clear in this public hearing, as an individual, as a solitary individual, I do not support the statements that have been made. I find them to be offensive, and I can certainly understand how they have caused harm in the communities that they may have been directed towards. My role as the leader for the university is to interpret the complexity in between the variety of value statements in our policies and our contractual obligations to any staff member, and to do my best as the leader of the university to ensure that we stand well if a matter is ultimately tested at the law. But make no mistake, at a personal level, I find the statements to which you've referred here and which are on the public record to be very disturbing.
I'm going to ask one last little question and then I'll hand over to my Deputy Chair, or the Deputy Chair. He's not my Deputy Chair. He's our Deputy Chair. Vice-Chancellor, who is responsible for ensuring compliance with the funding agreement and the Australian Code for Responsible Conduct of Research?
The university, under contractual obligation to the Australian Research Council, the national body that awards the grant.
So the Australian Research Council was asked in Senate estimates about this issue and asked about this particular professor, and they had written to you multiple times about this and sought clarification about the compliance with the research grant. Can you give us an update on your efforts to ensure compliance of the Australian Research Council?
I can, and perhaps Dr McLennan can amplify if required. We have been in communication with the ARC around the discharge of responsibilities around oversight of that grant and the integrity thereof. We have given the ARC the assurances about that, and testimony has been provided about that by the ARC at another committee's hearing late last year. We are in dialogue with the ARC at the moment about this matter.
So are you aware of comments made recently at the Queensland University of Technology by Dr Abdul Fattah where she said that I look for ways to bend rules and refuse and subvert them?
I'm aware of what's been reported in the public media.
The ARC have said they've got significant concerns about these comments, and they've also said that they've engaged directly with you. Are you able to give us an update on what those conversations have been?
Those conversations began last week and they are in progress, in fact, right now at the university.
So there is a current investigation into the compliance of this research grant by the university?
We are responding to every request from the Australian Research Council, engaging with them, and I believe they are engaged with us directly right now on that matter.
In your view,
Today.
And in your view, do you believe that that this particular research grant is upholding the standards in the Code of Conduct, responsible conduct?
All I have available to me from what the particular academic staff member is alleged to have said at the meeting last week at Queensland University of Technology is what has been reported in the media. I do not have any primary evidence of a transcript or videotape of what was said.
Okay. I'm going to hand over to the Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Professor Doughton, how do you feel that Jewish students on your campus, or prospective Jewish students who were assessing whether they would like to attend your university, would feel about the situation where you have a staff member who is, as the Chair has outlined, repeatedly posting things on social media which are highly offensive and clearly anti-Semitic?
We've engaged very regularly with the representatives from the Australian Union of Jewish Students, both the local branch, and they have on occasions brought other students from other universities from the state branch. And I believe through those interactions that I personally have had myself, along with our engagement with Jewish community organisations in Sydney, I believe that they understand our position very clearly. Our students have expressed back to me that they have appreciated very much the support that I and the Dean of Students have provided. They've said that to us, they've written to us. We have a very open dialogue with them. We provide a lot of support, and I would anticipate that the degree of caring we've provided towards those students, as we do for all of our students, would be reflected back into the applicant pool of the university.
You don't think they would have concern that that academic is still at your institution?
I can understand how they may have concern about that. We are careful to ensure that our students understand our position and our genuine caring for their well-being as a part of the Macquarie University community.
Last year it was reported that your university was investigating an incident where Randa Abdul Fattah led a primary school excursion to the encampment at the University of Sydney, and the university was going to determine whether this was appropriate and within the university's code of conduct. It's been 9 months since then. Has there been any outcome from that investigation?
Any use of the word investigation in that matter is a fabrication by the news media. That word was never used by the university.
You don't think it warranted an investigation?
We are aware of that incident, which was conducted on private time not as a representative of the university community.
So you didn't investigate?
I'm not going to go into here through matters of privacy and confidentially about an individual staff member. I believe every Australian deserves those rights which are emboldened in the laws created by this Parliament.
What about the rights of Jewish students to feel safe at your university?
The rights of every student at my university has to feel safe are very strong. Those have recently been strengthened through regulatory change around psychosocial safety. We put an enormous amount of effort, including escalating effort, over recent years to ensuring that our students have a safe environment and feel as though that they are able to come towards us through our various complaint systems to express their concerns.
Well, my concern is that you claim that you have zero tolerance, but I think it's clear that you are tolerating anti-Semitism on your campus.
I don't agree with that at all, Deputy Chair. What I have said before and I state again is we do work in this complex space at the intersection between the values basis, which we hold very dearly to as emboldened in our policies and procedures, and the reality that ultimately the anti-Semitism, whether something is anti-Semitic or not, is ultimately a matter to be defined at law. And my concern is that in Australian law at the moment, we have inadequate help from the law in defining what anti-Semitism really is.
Let me ask you this. On Boxing Day last year, this staff member of yours did a tweet that said, "May 2025 be the end of Israel." Is that anti-Semitic?
As an individual, I can certainly accept that could be construed as anti-Semitic.
It's not just could be construed. Someone calling for the destruction of Israel is anti-Semitic. Will you accept that, Professor?
I would say again, whether something is anti-Semitic or not, ultimately should be tested at the law in Australia, and I point out again my view that the law is not completely helpful in that regard.
What about when you changed her profile picture to a picture of a Palestinian paratrooper the day after the October 7 attacks? Is that anti-Semitic?
Personally, I believe that is an anti-Semitic statement. But whether I believe something is anti-Semitic or not doesn't necessarily hold that it would be subject to the test of law. If further information would be wished to be gleaned about any particular academic staff member in my community, I do not believe a public forum is the right place to do that, because as pointed out by myself and another member of your committee, individuals are afforded certain respect with regard to privacy and confidentiality.
This individual has been glorifying in the death of innocent Jews. That's what that post is about. And they enjoy earning a wage at your university. I'm just flabbergasted at your lack of response to that and the capacity. It seems that you're obfuscating in the face of a significant crisis that's happening in this country. This is why we have an inquiry here today. This is why we're inquiring into this topic. It is so important. And I'm not sure if you've followed the activity that's been occurring across the country over recent months, but it concerns me that you are tolerating anti-Semitism on your campus and hiding behind policies and procedures.
I don't agree with that. I've indicated before there are other contexts in which I would be happy to provide further information around any particular individual academic staff member, and I made such a request in writing before this committee convened.
Chair, if I may.
Please, Kylie.
Thank you for appearing here this morning. It strikes me, as I've listened to the questions that have been directed at you, that there remains a question for me. In the case where there is an accusation of racism levelled against somebody who is in your employ, what is your standard response to receipt of an accusation like that?
If we receive an accusation like that, which has a reasonable level of concern, the enterprise agreement of the university prescribes the steps that we must take in addressing that concern. Those steps include putting the allegation to the academic staff member in writing and having them have a chance to respond to that. The university then has available to it a range of steps beyond that it can go through, including under the enterprise agreement, empanelling a so-called misconduct investigation committee, which has one member appointed by the university, one member appointed by the union, and a third member agreed to by both parties. That misconduct investigation committee proceeds forward with its investigation and reports back to the university, and then the university can, based upon the findings of that misconduct investigation committee, they can take a variety of they can decide to sanction the individual in a variety of different ways, or they can require, or they can take the findings in a variety of different ways, action-wise, or decide how they're going to proceed.
And so in the circumstance that's been outlined to you today, in the actions that have been taken by this academic, have you received a formal complaint about this academic? And has that process been followed with this academic?
We have always adhered to, with any academic staff member, the sort of terms that I referred to there. With regard to this particular academic staff member, again, I would crave that she deserves the considerations of confidentiality in relation to any employment matter with the university. That's been a consistent stand I've taken inside the university with the news media, and I say again here, I have requested that option for this hearing in writing before the committee met.
I think perhaps, and I accept everything you've just said, I feel like perhaps that is part of the missing testimony. I think if there was a sense that the process had been followed, I do agree, everyone has the right to a fair hearing, and certainly in this space I think there is still a lot of debate about whether criticism of Israel and Zionism as a political movement constitutes a racial attack against Jews. But I think what's missing here is evidence that there has been that investigation per se. So I would just put it on note that I think it would bring a level of greater clarity to the process if there was some on-record agreement as to whether the situation had actually been investigated.
With this particular issue in mind, I formally wrote to the Secretariat of this committee last week and made an option available to the committee. That option is there at the committee's behest. That is not of my choice.
Thank you.
Mr. Perrott or Jody? Ms. Senator?
Yeah, just a quick question. I'm curious, you've repeated a number of times today that the university has a policy of zero tolerance. Yet it seems to me by the actions and by your processes and the lack of the lack of any remedy that there is at least some tolerance. Can you give some confidence to your students that you do have, in fact, a zero tolerance policy when it comes to these matters? Because the lack of action and consequence, it seems, for individuals, and I appreciate you not wanting to go into individual circumstances, but there are some very clear examples here of where things are anti-Semitic, or at least very much seen to be against the standards of the university that you've purported here today, yet there is seemingly no consequence. So can you explain what zero tolerance actually means to the university? It seems to be that there's some tolerance.
Our tolerance for any act of discriminatory behaviour is zero. That is clearly stated in our policy frameworks. As I have indicated several times previously here today, any potential sanction against any member of our community, staff or student, would have to fall through our policy framework and ultimately for a staff member through the enterprise agreement. I would repeat again that I wrote to this committee before suggesting that there may be matters raised which could provide additional clarity for this committee to hear in a different setting than this, in a public hearing. And as I said before, that is not in my purview to demand, it is in my purview to request or suggest as a possibility. And
Can you explain why does it take so long for that process to occur? I mean, the Deputy Chair gave some evidence of a tweet that went out on the day after the October 7 attack. And yeah, there doesn't seem to be there's no response from the university. So why does it take no public response in relation to what actually occurred there? So why does it take so long?
I'll respond to your question, Senator, with two thoughts. The first is again to state that any implication of inaction or action could be discussed in a different setting than here. In answer to your question about why does it take so long, I would suggest, and I've advocated this over the years I've been Vice-Chancellor, that there is room for the relationship agreements between universities and their staff to be re-looked at in terms of industrial law. My own view is that the enterprise agreements, which were founded some decades ago, have landed a long way from what the original intent of an enterprise bargaining agreement approach was. They have become much more detailed and much more legalistic documents. I think there is room to achieve what I think you're suggesting, which is to speed things up, and I personally would like to see that happen through industrial law reform.
We've only got another minute or so. I might just ask a quick question, Professor, and thank you for being here with us today. In your meetings with Jewish students, which you referenced in the opening statement, what was the request of Jewish students?
The request of Jewish students was consistent and clear to us to seek reassurance about the university's stand on anti-Semitism and discrimination in general, and to seek our support for them and their desire and aspiration to be able to pursue their studies and campus life the way any university student would aspire to.
When was the first meeting you had with Jewish students?
I don't have that date here. I'd be happy to provide that.
Last year?
It was last year, yes.
Yeah. And was a request made for a safe space on university?
The request was made for a safe space on the university campus, yes.
And was that provided?
Yes.
When was that provided?
Again, I'd have to go back and consult with the Dean of Students. I'm happy to provide that.
So roughly when was the meeting? Like first half of last year, second half of last year?
I believe it was in the first half of last year. I'm happy to take on notice to provide that.
And roughly, so the first half of last year, and then roughly when was the safe space provided for students?
Again, I'd have to consult with the Dean of Students.
First half of last year, like quickly?
Honestly,
within weeks?
I don't know.
So you don't know. So students made a request to you for a safe space, and you don't know when you gave them the safe space?
My understanding is that the request for a safe space was responded to promptly, but I do need to check the detail of that with the relevant senior officers at the university.
Why didn't you want to know if there was a safe space given to students or not?
Why? I'm sorry.
Well, if you don't know if a safe space, when the safe space was given, why didn't you want to know? Why wouldn't you?
What I've said, Senator, is I don't have the detail of when the request was made here with me today and when the safe space was provided. We responded to that request, and I want to be very clear. The students made that request. We responded to it. The details of both of those request and response, I simply don't have here.
Okay. If you're able to provide the date of the meeting that request was made and the date in which that space was provided by the university, that would be very helpful, Vice-Chancellor. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for appearing before the committee and the giving of your time today. Given the tight turnaround, the committee requested answers to questions taken on notice are provided to the committee secretariat by close of business 7 February 2025. We thank the Vice-Chancellor and the Pro-Vice-Chancellor from Macquarie University for coming here today and for the evidence and for your efforts, and we wish you a good day.
Thank you. Might I leave this statement with the Secretariat?
Sure.
To be entered into the record.
We'll just pause for a moment while we bring the next witnesses. I'll be back in a sec. Shall we? So I now welcome representatives from the Queensland University of Technology. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to parliamentary committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee today?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Professor Margaret Shield and I'm the Vice-Chancellor of QUT.
Thank you, Professor.
I'm Miss Leanne Harvey and I'm Vice President Administration of QUT.
Thank you, Ms Harvey. I'll now invite you to make an opening statement. At the conclusion of that, we'll open up for a discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. And I would like to thank the committee for having me here today to join you in working towards an understanding of how we can address the serious issue of anti-Semitism and racism generally on our campuses and across society. I'm joined here by the Vice Principal Administration and University Registrar, Miss Leanne Harvey, who is the QUT Executive responsible for student welfare and other non-academic student support and corporate services, including campus security. I can share with the committee some of the experiences we've had at QUT and the steps we have taken to learn from those experiences, how we can better protect our staff, our students and the wider community while still enhancing our ability to fill our teaching and research mission. QUT made a submission to the current inquiry in December 2024, which outlined our experiences since the attacks on 7 October 2023, the actions we took immediately and subsequently, and the policy frameworks that informed our approach. QUT, in the immediate aftermath of those events, I wrote to all staff and students deploring the devastation and loss of life, offering the university's community our support, providing reminders of and links to the professional counselling and other support services available to those who needed it, and encouraging all members of the QUT family to exercise kindness, empathy, understanding and compassion. Last year, around the time of the anniversary of the attacks, I met with a small group of Jewish staff. No, we have a very small group of Jewish staff at QUT, to check in with them and to seek their advice on how the university's support services were meeting staff and student needs. This followed a number of weeks of activism on campus at QUT, which resulted in the QUT Student Guild holding a special general meeting on 15th of August 2024, so my meeting with the staff followed that, where there was a call and a meeting that involved several motions in support of Palestine and also a range of related issues. QUT Security and the Office of the Registrar worked very closely with the Guild to ensure the meeting was safe and respectful for all students in attendance, including those with differing views. and the meeting was conducted without incident. From 7th of October 23 to 29th of November 24, when we compiled the data that formed our submission, QUT had received no formal complaints relating specifically to antisemitism. Again, noting our numbers are very small, I am aware of a very small number of concerns raised that were dealt with at the time and did not escalate to complaints. Over that same period, we received 11 complaints about racial discrimination more generally and 16 additional complaints about other forms of discrimination and prejudice, so that gives you the context. There were no complaints of physical violence or verbal abuse in those cases. In January this year, the university's Currumbin Institute, which is the university's Indigenous Research and Education Centre, held a national symposium on unifying anti-racist research and action, arising from a collaborative research bid led by QUT with investigators from a number of partner universities. The symposium itself was held on Thursday, January 23rd and Friday 24th at the Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centre. The program aimed to bring together researchers, practitioners, policymakers and people with direct experience of racism to discuss the unifying elements of anti-racist research and learn about initiatives across the country and around the globe. On the afternoon before the symposium, Wednesday 22nd, the organisers staged an associated event, the Greatest Race Debate, at the Gardens Theatre on QUT's Gardenport campus. At the debate, external speakers showed slides that caused offence to a number of people. I subsequently apologised on behalf of the community for the hurt caused to anyone within and outside the QUT community as a result of those images and what was said there. I unreservedly repeat that apology here today for the hurt and concern that these events caused both to our own staff and students and to the wider community. QUT also reached out and apologised to an academic from another university who reported through the press that he had felt shamed in a symposium session. I am saddened and disappointed that these events overshadowed an important academic symposium on a very serious issue, especially as it relates to the lived experience of racism of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I have commissioned an independent arm's-length review by the eminent jurist, the Honourable John Middleton AM KC, to establish the facts of these events, the extent to which they may have aligned to our own policies and code of conduct, and to make recommendations which I intend to accept in full. It is clear to me that one or more things went wrong here, mistakes were made, and I'm confident we can and will do better to safeguard our community while strengthening our culture, which includes both academic freedom and inclusion as core values. We will also share the findings publicly and with this committee so we can share the learnings from this event. It is critical we learn from what happened to ensure that such a similar incident doesn't happen again. And thank you, Chair, and I'll be pleased to answer questions.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. We haven't heard an apology yet in this committee, so that's a first, so I thank you for that. I do want to ask you a few questions about the symposium, and I want to start with the Australian Academic Alliance Against Anti-Semitism, who wrote to you on the 17th of January, I believe, raising concerns about the upcoming conference. Some of the concerns weren't about the comedy event, but more around the speakers at the conference who have a demonstrated history of engaging in anti-Jewish racism, including the spreading of disinformation, disparaging stereotypes about Jews, the doxing of Jewish individuals, and the demonisation of the Jewish community, and calls for the elimination of the Jewish state. How did you respond to that?
So, I became aware of that correspondence on the Monday when I returned from leave, that there were concerns about a number of speakers who would be speaking at the symposium on the following Thursday. So at that point, we did what we would normally do, and amongst my senior staff, there were steps in place to put in place to look at the security of the event, the risk of the event, and a range of other matters in relation to that concern about those particular speakers, including a number of actions around particularly advising the organisers around shutting down any form of hate speech should it occur.
So, unfortunately, they didn't adhere to that. And there was even an award given in the symposium to a Mr. Chun, Matt Chun, who made public comments saying that they were invited to attend the Unifying Anti-Racist Research and Action to create a visual journal during the program. Now, for an ordinary person, that doesn't sound too problematic, but Mr. Chun was involved in the doxing of the 600 Jewish creatives. Are you aware that he was invited by the symposium or to participate in the symposium?
So all of the one of the reasons, and for many reasons, but the reason we've called an independent judicial review is so that I can establish all the facts in relation to the symposium, how various people were invited, what was said, and so on. And I'm not in a position to comment on either the allegations about individuals or what was said at that time. We will provide all that material to the independent review, and then I'll be in a position to act.
Thank you, Professor. So, Mr. Chun has said, I don't like the phrase October 7th was justified. Why are we even entertaining anyone so ignorant and morally disarranged that they might still need to hear this absolute truism? Are you aware, or has anyone advised you of the sort of any other comments made by Mr. Chun?
So I'm not sure. I understand he has provided. He has made those comments publicly. We will provide those to the review if that's the case, and that will be seen in the context of what was actually said. So,
so the point isn't that he made it. I mean, clearly these statements are of someone who is glorifying terrorism and. Goodness, I've got so many things that this guy has said, but I don't want to. I don't want to publicise the rhetoric of this character. But he has, he was involved in the doxing of individuals. He has made comments glorifying terrorism. He has repeatedly used his public platform to attack Jewish people in Australia. And he was given an award at this conference, Professor. I mean, and I appreciate the genuine concern that you have and the steps that you've taken. Frankly, they are more than other universities have done. I'm just trying to really stress the point that when Jewish academics or academics that write to you raising these concerns, how important it is that those concerns are taken seriously before these sorts of things can happen in the public domain.
So we as I said, we received that information on the Monday. We put in steps. We put in place steps that, in relation to the particular symposium, I will fully investigate all aspects of the symposium, and there are many things about this that I feel very sad about and that I personally find unacceptable.
So, I mean, what confidence can you give that such a symposium or such an event wouldn't happen again on university?
I'm confident we will learn from this external review, and there will be processes and procedures that that we either amend or we follow or advertise in a different way. I'm sure we were going to learn from this, absolutely. And what I can say is that, you know, it's equally problematic to try and shut someone down on the basis of what they might say, but I can act on what has been said or what has been done, and that's what we will do.
So the final question from me before I hand over to my colleagues is just to be mindful of another aspect of what occurred at this symposium. Was that another award was given to another professor, which was the feature of the discussions earlier this morning, where this professor was given an award for making the most of social media, and yet in 2024 they used their social media to dox 600 Jewish creatives in Australia.
Senator, I knew I was going to call you. I'm sorry.
Not a lofty senator.
I did a lot of Senate estimates in my time. I apologise. I knew that I would do that. I'm sorry. Look, all of that will be the subject of the independent review, and I'm not trying to hide behind that, but, you know, I have to ensure that everybody has, that we actually have the facts, that we have the transcripts, that there's been an opportunity to establish what was said and what wasn't said. I can say that some of the things that have been reported to me, I would personally find offensive, and that's in fact why I apologise for the slide that I first saw, because I was offended and I knew people would be offended by that. But I can't, at the same time, I need to ensure that we have natural justice and so on, but I also need to get all the facts.
I think I think that's obviously positive, Vice Chancellor. I'm really stressing though that when academics write to you outlining that there is a concern that people participating in a symposium, which may have had some legitimate and good speakers, but also highlights the dangers of other speakers that were invited, including those who have been actively targeting Jewish community members, that it is incumbent on universities to listen to those sorts of requests and to do the due diligence before these symposiums occur, not after. I think it's possible that everyone learnt the hard way on this one, Vice Chancellor.
So, Chair, I appreciate that. And I also appreciate how difficult it is to do something in advance. It's better if it doesn't happen at all. But at the point and over the timelines at which we were working, we put in place as many measures as we could, and we were very clear that we would act on anything that was said as opposed to what might be said.
I'm going to hand over to the Deputy Chair, and if there's time, I'll ask some more questions.
Thank you, Chair. Professor Shield, you mentioned that once you'd received the letter of concern from the Alliance, you took certain action to try to mitigate the risks around the symposium. You mentioned that you... I can't remember your exact words, so I won't misquote you, but I just want to dig a bit deeper as to what exactly you did. Did you take these concerns to Chelsea Wotago, who's the Executive Director of the Institute?
So, Registrar, would you like to comment on what we did after receiving the first letter?
So we looked at what were the risk assessments that were around the symposium. We looked at, and I believe that the Vice-Chancellor spoke to one of the senior colleagues to talk to Professor Wotago with regards to making sure that it was a safe, inclusive space. We spoke to the security that were at the event at the symposium. We liaised with both the AFP and QPS with regards to what we could, what could we do about making sure that things were safe, should things happen, because as Professor Shield had said, it is really important about what might be said versus what is said, and making sure that it's a safe event for everybody that was attending.
Did you ask for certain speakers to be uninvited?
No, I did not.
Okay. You didn't think that would be appropriate, given what we know about some of the speakers who were there?
I did not, because at that point, I think my judgment was that that would have been potentially impacting on other concerns about the freedom of speech and the academic freedom of expression and freedom of speech.
So you were concerned that people would be denied the freedom to express remarks that they're already on the record anti-Semitic?
If you we complying with the academic freedom and freedom of speech policy, which was introduced into our university and other universities in 2019, it's very complex as to how you actually can apply that. And actually, if I had at that point, on the basis of some correspondence and representations I'd received, I ran the risk of actually not complying and also causing issues in relation to those policies.
Okay. We mentioned earlier, well, the Chair mentioned Mr Chun and his involvement in the doxing incident. Are you aware of the comments that were made by the Director of the Corumba Institute, Chelsea Wattago, in relation to that same doxing incident?
Senator, I have great value. I greatly value Professor Wattago's scholarship and the work that she's done and what she's tried to do in addressing and eliminating racism. In relation to other comments, and that I have not had a direct complaint about, but we will put all the evidence in relation to anything to do with this symposium to Justice Middleton.
You weren't aware of her comments in relation to the release of that information and encouraging? She said it was worth a read, and of course people should be doing something about it, about the release of the 600 details in relation to the Jewish creatives.
No, I wasn't.
You wasn't aware of that? Okay. And what about your reaction to the footage that's been leaked of the symposium where she was recorded leading a room of people in a shame chant?
Deputy Chair, we've got in the footage that was recorded by the partners in the event. We received that last night or the night before, and that will be provided to Justice Middleton, and that needs to be verified and assessed in that context. Okay.
So is the university going to take any action beyond the review? Are you going to take any action independently, or are you going to await the outcome of the review?
For the circumstances around this particular event, I will accept all the findings of the independent review. In relation to other aspects, if matters are brought to our attention in relation to other aspects of policy and so on, we'll act accordingly.
When is the review due?
We only commissioned it yesterday, so these events happened 2 weeks ago. We anticipate 8 to 12 weeks, but it depends on the volume of material that I keep calling him Justice Middleton, but it's not that. The Honourable John Middleton, it depends on how long it's going to take him to do that, yes. But normally, when I commission reviews of this type or any investigation, we always advise the investigator or the reviewer that if there's any matters that require immediate action because people would be unsafe or because I need to do something more swiftly in the process through that, I would expect to be alerted of that and I would act accordingly.
And what if the Corumba Institute wants to hold another event in the interim?
The Corumba Institute will not be holding events like this in the interim.
Senator, and then, sorry, we'll go because we're in opposition. We'll go Mr Perrott, and then we'll come to you, Senator.
Thanks, Chair. And I should declare up front that I did my teaching degree and law degree at QUT, and my son is at QUT. So I just want to get this time frame right. The Symposium on Unifying Anti-Racist Research has a call out in September 24 around the world, basically calling for people, or the way academic information is distributed?
So it was called through the partners on the centre proposal.
Okay.
Right. So they, and there were various partners both nationally and internationally on the proposal,
yep.
And it was because of the time frames around developing centre bids, they were seeking not research that had been done, but experiences of racism or discrimination that would inform the research that was to come.
And there was no, you didn't say, First Nations people don't bother applying or Jewish people don't apply.
No.
You weren't racist in your racist symposium.
Yeah.
Okay, so the broad range of people. That's September 24. So very public.
Public within that community
in the academic world. Yes. And then I think you get a letter from the Queensland Jewish Board of Deputies on the 21st of January, or mine's dated the 21st of January. There's no timestamp.
Yeah, so they come into my Vice-Chancellor inbox.
Okay, are you having a holiday, I assume?
I had a holiday. I came back, so the letter that we received...
I'm not accusing you, Vice-Chancellor, but...
No, I came back on the Monday. We got the first... I was made aware of the first letter on that Monday, and I think that letter came in on the Tuesday.
Okay, then the 22nd, there's a response... The next day, a response from Deputy Vice-Chancellor Indigenous Australians Angela Leach, is that how you pronounce it?
Angela Leach, yes.
Angela Leach. So I don't have times of day, but the next day, which is also the day that you're having the event at Gardens Point campus, and it's more of a humorous...
It was
it's not an academic... serious event. I just want you to tell me what the event was.
Well, it was an event associated with the symposium.
But with a satirical bent, or am I putting
Well, clearly it did.
It was described as humorous.
It was a debate where there was satire for sure. But I wasn't aware of that event until that day.
Okay. But so in terms of cancelling people that might be at the Gardens Point event, it's the day of that event.
That's correct.
So it would be a compressed time frame to...
A very compressed time frame. In fact, we only became aware of the debate associated with the event when we sought to find a senior leader to...
And sorry, Professor, when you say we, were you involved, or were you trying to have a break, or were you...
No, I was there that day. I came back on the Monday. Okay. First correspondence is coming in Monday, Tuesday. That event was on the Wednesday, and the symposium was Thursday and Friday. So at that point, that's me and various members of my senior team, including the registrar, we were concerned about the symposium. I wasn't aware of the debate.
The event, okay. And the nature of the symposium, so it's under the QUT umbrella. Is it a QUT event, or you're facilitating and there's some other entity running it, or is it a purely QUT event in another hired facility?
Yes, so that will all be subject to the review, but it was off... The symposium was not on QUT's campus, and it didn't involve QUT event organisers.
Okay. And then on a slightly different tack, just generally for those that don't know, the Gardens Point campus, it's right next door to Queensland Parliament, where there has been a long history of protests and public demonstrations and the like. Could you just talk us through how you cope with the fact that you're right alongside a place of protest and your students have to go back and forth through that?
So I think Ms Harvey, who deals with that almost on a daily basis...
Lucky you, Ms Harvey.
Best position to answer that.
So you won't be surprised to know that we have a very good relationship with Queensland Parliament. Speaker's Corner actually abuts our campus, and staff and students
Which is a public space for people to
walk through
protest,
that.
basically.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we do is that we work with that and we notify our community when we're aware that there are protests and what's coming, and should people wish alternative ways of getting in. So we give them good warning about that things are going to be on there. We put additional patrols in place to support our staff and students.
Your security staff?
Our security staff can go up to the edge, obviously, of our campus.
Enforce, is there a boundary between the public space of Queensland and QUT? Or is
it would be like the middle of this room.
So,
yes, it is literally a very wide footpath.
Okay.
So we work with that and notify people, give different options for how to access, or if people want to choose whether they go online that day and those types of things. We also have the same issue when rock and pop concerts are on at River Stage, which is at the other end of our campus. So,
the other side of you.
Yeah, we have a campus
You're
notification.
surrounded by pop and Parliament. Wonderful.
Yes.
And some gardens.
Thank you. It is a beautiful location. So we look at, well, how do we do that and how do we support people? And of course, one of the best ways to support people is to ask them what they want. And that's what we do. So that's why we let people know when things are going on, and we offer alternatives and we offer support if people are impacted should anything happen on non-QUT land as they're approaching. And we offer that support wherever that may have occurred and if they felt intimidated or unsafe in any shape or form. And we work very closely with the Queensland Police Service, QPS.
Okay, and the Parliament security.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. It is a very good working relationship in that precinct.
So you're supportive of people's right to protest, which hasn't always been the case in Queensland, but okay. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for appearing today. I went to the symposium. It was amazing. Everybody was excited and connecting as thought-provokers, activists, elders, community members. So it was a really terrific symposium, and I congratulate the university and in particular the Karumba Institute. I would like to table some documents, please, if I may. The Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism, which I've let the Secretariat know. So my question is, in your submission, you recognise anti-Semitism as a form of racism. Do you consider that conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism undermines genuine efforts to combat racial and religious discrimination?
Senator, I'm not the expert on this, but what I've responded to and what I continue to respond to is how do people interpret and receive criticism and offensive remarks, and others who are much better equipped to me than I am to make the argument around the distinctions that you're referring to. It's not my area of expertise. I'm a chemist.
Thank you. At the time of your submission, you stated that QUT has reported 0 accounts of anti-Semitism on any of its campuses since October 7, but 16 complaints of racism. Do those numbers remain the same today?
So we're still in the process of working through the complaints that we've received in relation to and the correspondence, and there's a huge volume of correspondence we've received in relation to the symposium. We are categorising them. There have been, and I remain concerned about both the staff that have reached out to me concerned about the symposium, and I'm also deeply saddened, as I said, that these events have overshadowed the very important work in relation to combating the discrimination faced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And I suspect that everybody involved and has has received some form of, correspondence or emails about this, and that we're working through that. And any of those that we immediately identify where staff have asked for, students have asked for support, we've reached out to them and asked them what they need. And Professor Harvey can also talk about that.
Yeah, Ms Harvey,
thank you. Sorry, I promoted you, demoted.
Yes.
Can I just clarify, though, that there were 0 complaints of antisemitism since October 7?
So that's formal complaints, right? And what we do is, if someone was to raise an issue, and I know of the 2 that were raised with me directly, we immediately reach out to those and ask them for what support they need. And in the case of the father and the staff member that I'm aware of, they didn't escalate into formal complaints. They were concerns about, often about the activities outside the campus.
So in terms of formal complaints on anti-Semitism, there was 0 prior to the symposium, but there were 16 formal complaints of racism. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I've got another question. Is it correct that... were other Jewish delegates in attendance at either of the events, and have you received any claims or concerns of anti-Semitism from them or other delegates?
So if I could answer that. I think it's important to note we've received quite a number of correspondence, as the Vice-Chancellor has pointed out, and we are still working through that. We'd be happy to take that on notice.
And just one more, Chair. Sure. That's all right. The symposium was titled National Symposium Unifying Anti-Racist Research and Action. Can you advise how QUT, Currumba Institute, sought to unify these efforts in practice? For example, what was the purpose of the symposium, and were individuals or organisations excluded from registering, attending or speaking at the events based on their political beliefs, particularly in relation to Israel?
So, Senator, I'm not sure whether you were here for my opening statement, but I did cover the purpose in my opening statement. And we did... so there's two parts to that question. One is, were people excluded from attending? And then the question about whether people were asked to or excluded from speaking. And the first of those, it was a ticketed event that where it was widely advertised, and people bought tickets, including at least one academic who identified him as being a member of that 5A alliance. In relation to the speakers, once the call for the speakers and the panellists was made through the partners and in the Centre of Excellence bid, which you'd be aware of, and once the program was set, I think at least one individual sought to be represented on the program but wasn't able to be because the program was at that point complete.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks.
But again, all of that will be covered in the review by Justice Middleton.
Thank you.
In the interest of time, I'm just going to move on and ask another question. So as part of the review, Vice-Chancellor, can I make a request that Ms Wadago, or is it Professor Wadago?
Professor Wadago.
Professor Wadago, my apologies, wrote a recent piece which I think goes to the, if there is an examination of appropriateness of holding anti-racism symposiums, that this be included in the evidence. The professor wrote, to properly understand how racism is working, reports like this, in reference to a Human Rights Commission report, must go beyond collating individual feelings and experiences as though all perspectives are equal. That's the first bit, and I'm skipping a paragraph and going to the next, the third paragraph that I've got in front of me, which says, who has access to state militaries, land, weapons, media, political influence, government support, international recognition and money. And I would just urge that the review include those comments by the professor, because to me they sound very eerily like the sort of tropes that are directed towards Jewish people, and that it would be, I believe, appropriate for the review to consider those remarks and any other remarks that the professor has made in order to be confident that this professor is not in any way, in any platform, putting forward any views that could be misconstrued or could be aligned with what we would consider anti-Semitism.
Of course.
Okay.
I've got another question.
Sure, Lydia.
Well, we've got a little bit more time. Thank you. Is it clear that immense pressure is being placed on scholars who oppose racism and genocide? And what is the role of universities at this moment?
Senator, obviously our role is to protect our staff, our students, and ensure that our scholars, regardless of their views, have the opportunity to pursue their scholarship in a way that's safe and not subject to that influence. That's the purpose of academic freedom.
And my final question is, what has been the effect of the false claims of anti-Semitism attached to Professor Wadago and other First Nations staff at QUT and Indigenous-led anti-racism teaching and research efforts?
So some of those are more recent, and we've reached out to them to ask what support they need in response to those. But I would be I'm distressed about any claim that's made of that nature, and I'm sure that and the support that we've been providing to the Karumba and other a whole range of staff on our campus, in relation to a range of claims that are distressing to them and to me.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
To be clear on the front, there was no accusation. There was a request for that evidence to be included in the submission, given its concerning nature. I would also just ask the committee to agree that Senator Thorpe's request to table the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism be agreed by the committee. All those in favour, against, carried. On that note, can I say thank you very much, Vice-Chancellor and Vice-President, for appearing before the committee and for giving of your time today. The committee requests that answers to questions taken on notice are provided to the committee secretariat by close of business 7 February 2025. I also understand that you'll be providing the outcome of the report. The committee may or may not be in session at that point, but regardless, we appreciate that, and if it is made public, certainly we will keep an eye on it. That concludes today's hearings. Thank you to all witnesses who appeared, to Hansard, to Broadcasting. Thank you to the committee and the Secretariat. I believe that will be the last hearings of the Parliamentary Joint Committee. We now have important work to deliberate on the recommendations of this inquiry, and we will come back to the Parliament in the near future on that. Thank you.
Thank you.